Hi, good morning, everyone. As Nora said, I really appreciate you being here today for this webinar on conquering debt. We are going to jump right in. So my name is Sue Rogan. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the Cash Campaign of Maryland. And CASH stands for Creating Asset Savings and Hope. We're a statewide nonprofit that works with different partners across the state to really help advance the financial stability of individuals and families in Maryland by providing different programs and services to help people build their financial well-being. So some of the ones I wanted to share with you are our free tax preparation service. That's the image on the left here. And that is available for families who earn under $57,000 a year. So we really encourage you to let your friends and family know about this service. We do have partners across the state who are doing this. And during the pandemic, we have been able to be creative and find ways to do this virtually or with drop-off services. The other image in the center is talking about our advocacy work. So we really work with elected officials to educate them and to inform them on what are the issues that we are seeing with clients across the state and really focusing on our low to moderate income individuals. So this particular image refers to payday loans. So if you don't know, a payday loan is when someone needs some kind of income coming in before their paycheck actually hits maybe their bank account. So they often go to a service to take out a payday loan. And the concern with these loans had been the amount of interest and fees that were being charged to the person for taking out this loan. So in Maryland, we were able to work with different partners across the state to cap payday loans, fees and interest at 33%. And while that may still seem a little high, what we had been seeing previously was interest rates around 400%. So we have been able to cap these interest and fees for people that take out these loans in trying to help them not face such exorbitant amount of money that they have to pay for the loans. And then the other image here is talking about our financial coaching and financial planning programs. So the financial coaching program is where you can work one-on-one with a coach on a financial goal that you would like to have some support on. Sometimes it's a lot easier to have someone walking with you in the journey while you're working on things towards your financial goals than trying to do it alone. So this uses an app and you're able to meet with your coach virtually for as long as you would like. And this is at no cost to anyone. So we'd be able to talk with them whether on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, whatever you and your coach work out to again check in on the steps that have been created to help you reach your goals. The other program, the financial planning program, is where a certified financial planner or a CFP, which is sort of the gold standard in financial advising, they're donating their time to us to provide a financial plan for people that want them. So they'll meet with you 2 times. One is to ask questions around your holistic picture in terms of your finances, right? So what is the income? What are your expenses? How are you doing in terms of insurance, retirement savings? What are your goals for your finances? And then the second time they meet with you, they'll actually present you a personalized financial plan that is specific to you. And that gives you sort of the knowledge and expertise on what a financial planner is thinking that you might want to work on or address, or just see what you need to do in terms of addressing the goals that you want to. So both of those programs are available to individuals across Maryland. We also have a website that's mdcashacademy.org. And this website is meant to be the one place that you can go to find fact-based financial education. We screen all of the educators, all of the content to make sure that it's up to date, to make sure that it's credible, and to make sure it's not selling any products or services. Because we know it's hard to learn about money. We may not get this information consistently in schools or through our friends or family. So we really want to provide these classes for you that you can take them and learn any kind of different aspects around managing your finances. So right now they're all webinars, and we do have some that are in Spanish. We have some that are American Sign Language. We have many that have been recorded, such as this one today that we're doing. It will be posted on Cash Academy so that you can look at them whenever you want to. Maybe it's while you're cooking dinner, or maybe it's on a Saturday afternoon. But you can take a look at the ones that you're interested in whenever you want to. So check out www.mdcashacademy.org. And we also have information on Cash Academy that is specific to resources that are available during this very difficult time of a pandemic and all of the financial impacts that have been incurred by people due to this situation. So these are the different topics that we have specific resources, whether it's information on eviction prevention or foreclosure or housing counseling or different what's going on with utilities and the shutoff moratoriums. So check out this resource as well if you need some information to be able to assist you during this time. So we want to start out, and if you don't mind putting in the chat box, we're going to do a true or false quiz here around debt, because that is our topic today. And we want to just kind of start understanding what is the picture around debt here in the US. So these are true or false questions. Our first one is, the average household in the US has 3.5 credit or debit cards and around $16,000 in debt. So do you think that's true or false? If you could just drop it in the chat box, that'd be great. Oh, I'm already seeing a true. Thank you. I'll give it just a second. False. True. Awesome. Thank you so much for participating. That really helps. This is hard not being in person. Some more truths. All right. Thank you very much again. And this is true, that the average household has about that many credit cards and around $16,000 in credit card debt. Our second question. Credit card debt is the fourth largest category of household debt, following behind mortgages, so that's number one, student loans number two, car loans number three, and then credit card debt number four. Do you think that's true or false? So is credit card debt after all these others? After mortgages, after student loans, after car loans? I see some falses. Well, you guys are really smart consumers, aren't you? This actually is false. So credit card debt is the third largest category of debt. It goes before car loans. So mortgages are still number one, student loans are number two, then credit card debt, then car loans. All right, our last one is student loan debt upon graduation, on average, here in Maryland specific, is about $20,000. So you think that's true or false? I'm definitely seeing everybody say false on this one. Again, kudos to you guys. You're awesome. That absolutely is false. The average student loan debt in Maryland upon graduation is $27,000, and it is rising. So debt happens, debt is an issue, and it's something that we need to think about how to handle so that it's not impacting negatively our financial well-being. So I want to start off with debt collectors and what they can and cannot do, because I've been talking to a lot of people who are getting calls from debt collectors. These debt collectors are violating the federal law, and the federal law is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. This was put into place because here in America, we do have some values around understanding that debt happens, but that people shouldn't be preyed upon or have really either deceptive or really fraudulent sort of activity around trying to collect that debt. So the law, again, is Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. And it's important to note that the original creditor, say it's a hospital, those are actually not covered under this law. This law covers actual companies who are in the business of collecting debt. Business debt also is not covered under this law. So if you've had a small business and you incurred debt over it, unfortunately, the protections in this law do not cover you. But some of the parameters around debt collectors is that they can only call between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. They are not supposed to call at midnight. They are not supposed to call at 6 a.m. They're only supposed to call between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. Again, because this law is trying to protect consumers from being harassed. They can contact people at work, but if they have been told not to call you at work, they are supposed to stop. They can call other people for actually getting information about the person. If they only can ask them, though, about their address or their phone number, so their contact information. They are not supposed to be telling someone's mother that the person owes them, $5,000 and they're not paying. They're not supposed to discuss the details of the debt. They can only ask for contact information. Some other rules are they are not allowed to make harassing or false statements. And the reason that you see the handcuffs here is because I've had multiple people tell me that they've received a phone call from a debt collection company saying that the police are down the street to arrest them if they don't pay this debt over the phone right here, right now. There is no police officer down that street whatsoever. That is absolutely false, and it is harassing. And that kind of information or that sort of technique used is actually prohibited by this federal law. If you want to, and we'll talk about this further in just a minute, if you send and you actually want to stop this debt collection company from contacting you anymore, you can send a letter that's a no contact letter, which I'll show you in just a minute. If you send that letter, they are supposed to stop contacting you, period. If they continue to contact you, they are violating that federal law. Now, timed bar debt. So let's define that just for a minute. If a debt is within the time parameters of the state in which it's in to take someone to court, that is under the statute of limitations. If the debt, though, has gone past that statute of limitations, whatever it might be in the state, that is considered time barred debt, meaning that it has passed the time that the debt collection company can legally take the consumer to court to try to collect that debt. If the consumer asks the debt collection company, is this debt time barred, meaning has it passed the statute of limitations that you can take me to court, the debt collection company is supposed to answer that question honestly. So these are just some other parameters and things that are included in that federal law that debt collection companies need to follow. Some other ones are, they must report the name of the original creditor. Sometimes it's very hard with debt. It tends to bounce around and get sold to one debt collection company after another. And sometimes we lose data during those sales, the different purchases. And so the debt collection company has to provide the consumer with who is his original debt from. It's hard to identify it sometimes, but it's up to them to identify it to you, the consumer. Also, a debt collector cannot report the debt or pull a credit report for a debt that did not arise from a contract or an actual consensual agreement to pay for this service or product. And where we saw this a lot was involving traffic tickets or library fines. I've literally seen library fines and collection activities that resulted from library fines on a person's credit report. So finally, and this has been a relatively recent change, it was recognized that I didn't sign a contract with this library. I may or may not have taken out a book and may or may not have returned it, but I didn't sign a contract for this service. Nor did I sign a contract in order to get a traffic ticket. They were showing up on people's credit reports as well. So now, fortunately, those types of debts are not supposed to be on someone's credit report. And if you see it on yours, you need to take the steps that we'll talk about in a minute to actually get that removed from the credit report. And then also fairly recently is the requirement that they have to have a process to remove that data, the library fines that are showing up on someone's credit report. They actually need to show they have a process to take that off of someone's credit report. Some other new changes that are very, I think, consumer friendly, is that medical debt can now not be reported on someone's credit report until after 180 days. And this was put into place because of all the disputes around insurance companies and making payments to the medical providers. Sometimes it takes a long time to get that resolved. So while the consumer actually doesn't owe it because they're insured and they've got the proper protection to pay this debt, it's in dispute, but it cannot go on the credit report. Also, medical debt must be deleted from someone's credit report if it's been paid in full, either by the consumer or by an insurance company. So if it's paid, it needs to come off the credit report if it's on there. And when the consumer alleges an insurance dispute, the collection account will not be put on a consumer's credit report. So this was meant to address all of the concerns and all of the mistakes and all of the issues with medical debt. So if you're seeing a problem with this, please make sure that you know these things are in place and that you have the right to dispute or take these items off of your credit report. So if you have debt collectors calling you, it can be really stressful. And a lot of people I've talked to are like, I don't even want to answer my phone. I'm just tired of dealing with this. It really is important that you take the steps to make sure that you are not being either harassed again or given false statements by these debt collection agencies, and that you take some control with the situation to have them stop and leave you alone so that you can reduce your stress around it. Again, debt happens, but we all need to figure out how to handle it to, again, best protect ourselves and to make sure that we're handling it to help us, again, with our financial picture. So if you're getting calls from them, please be polite. Don't get into a shouting, argument or a dispute, over the phone with the debt collector, but be firm about you're not going to discuss this matter over the phone. If you can, take the time to ask them, what's the name of your company? What's your name? And what's a phone number where I can reach you? Because if you need to file a dispute or a complaint against a debt collection company, you need this information so that the Consumer Protection Agency can actually handle that complaint. You don't want to discuss this debt over the phone. You have no idea who it is that's called you. We'll talk about scams in just a minute. So you don't know who they are, and you don't want to give away any of your legal rights. So no discussion of debt over the phone when someone's calling you. If you're at a place where you're ready, that will go through the steps that they're going to take, that you want to address the debt, then you're going to call them. That's okay. You can discuss the debt at that point. But anyone calling you, you do not want to discuss the debt. Ask to get, again, the name, information, phone number, and then say, I'm not going to discuss this over the phone, and hang up. Now, the last statement here is talking about reaffirming the debt. And I want to be clear that I'm not a lawyer, nor am I giving legal advice. I do have a resource at the end for you that is giving legal advice, but I am not doing that at this point. I just want to define what this means. So reaffirming the debt means, it's a legal term, that means I am agreeing that I owe this debt to this creditor, whether it's the original creditor or the debt collection agency. I'm agreeing that I owe it. The reason you don't want to do this at this point when you're talking to a debt collection agency is that has some impact on your legal rights and has the potential impact to sort of jumpstart that statute of limitations again, so that the company would actually have the right to take you to court to sue you for this debt. So when anyone's calling you, please follow the steps of being polite and firm, but not discussing the debt and not making the statement, I know I owe it, I'll get to you when I can, because that could be considered reaffirming the debt, and you may have lost some protections that you had in the legal process. So some other tips on dealing with debt collectors. After this part, we'll get pause and see if there's any questions about this. We're going to talk about this cease contact letter. And the reason I say send that if it's appropriate is if you have a current business relationship with this company, but maybe you owe them some money. Say it's a utility company, say electricity. You might be behind in your electric bill for a while, but you do want to have a relationship with this company, the electric company. You don't want to send the cease contact letter because that really shuts down all communications between you and the business. And the business that you want to maintain a business relationship with, it's going to really suffer and really sever that relationship. The company's not going to want to work with you at all. But if you have a debt collection agency that is just constantly calling you, really trying to really push and try to get a settlement agreement from you, and you're just not in a place to deal with this debt and you want them to stop, then this letter would be appropriate to send. Be very careful of debt collection scams. There are so many times where you get a phone call with someone saying that you owe them debt. They'll take half of it right now. Isn't that generous? If you pay them right here, right now over the phone, and you never owed that debt. So be very careful of any text messages, phone calls, emails, saying that you owe them something when you're not sure what this is about. There's too many people out there trying to separate you from your dollars, and you don't want to fall victim to it. And be sure that you know you have the right to file a complaint against a debt collection company if they're violating the federal law. You can complain to the Federal Trade Commission. You can complain to the Maryland Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. If you live in Montgomery County or Howard County, you have your own consumer protection agencies. So use them if you're feeling like this debt collection company isn't doing the fair thing under that law and violating it, because they actually do take action. They actually do fine them. Sometimes they literally will put them out of business, but they don't know it until people complain. So make sure if you need it and it's appropriate, to let consumer protection agencies know what's happening so they can address it and stop it. So this is the cease contact letter. And this is coming from the Federal Trade Commission. It's a sample letter that's on their website that you can just download and customize it to yourself, send it to the company, keeping a copy for your records because documentation is very important. If the company then continues to contact you, you have your proof that you've sent this letter, you file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, and if they develop a pattern of practice, the Federal Trade Commission will actually go after the company to have them stop doing their practice, or ultimately, if needed and appropriate, will actually file a cease and desist order against that company. So this is under the legal notice citing the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. You're asking them to cease all communications with me in regard to the debt. So it's supposed to shut that door so they leave you alone. So with that, I'll just see if there's any questions in the chat around debt collection. We want to make sure that you are in the driver's seat, if you will, of communications with debt collection companies so that they're not doing things that are against that law or harassing you or taking advantage of you. Okay, so I don't see any questions about debt collection. All right, and I just want to also frame a little bit to give you some knowledge about debt collection companies. So your original creditor, whoever you had your contract with, or not again, maybe a hospital, maybe a cell phone company, whoever it was, they often are not in the business and they don't have the resources to continue to collect debt. So once they've gotten past their sort of process of trying to collect the debt, they have two options. One is they will keep the debt legally under their ownership and they will assign it to a debt collection company who attempts to continue to collect the debt from the consumer. The debt collection company would then get a percentage of whatever it is the debt they can collect, and the original creditor will get the rest. The other option, which happens frequently, is that the original creditor will sell the debt. They just want to be done with it. They take whatever tax write-off they can. They sell the debt to a company who is in the business of collecting debt. Now, the Federal Trade Commission did a survey of these debt collection companies and found that on average, these companies paid 4 cents on the dollar for the debt that they buy. So you can imagine why they're in business, because if they collect those other 96 cents on the dollar of debt that they bought, that's a pretty good return on their investment. That's why these companies exist, because they actually have the ability to make a fair amount of money in trying to collect debt. Now, the issue is the ones who are the least, who are spending the least amount of money to buy debt are also getting the least amount of data. So they will literally sometimes get an Excel spreadsheet that gives the name and the amount of money due and some contact information for that person. They won't get contracts, copies of the documentation. They won't get any other data other than that information. So I want you to understand that as we start going through the steps that you want to take in terms of conquering the debt and getting rid of debt, because it's sort of important to know what we're going to ask for in terms of verification of the debt to see if that company that owns it really can collect on it. All right, so the first thing to think about in conquering debt and getting through it is to make sure, this is steps we're going to take to make sure we actually have money to pay back debt. So the first thing you're going to do is create that spending plan or that budget. Make sure you know where every dollar is going, all the money coming in, all the money going out, and seeing if there is money left over in terms of being able to pay down debt. Step two is really important to think about before you start really addressing any debt accounts, is making sure you have some money in place in case there's an emergency, because life happens. A car is going to break down. You may need some kind of assistive technology, such as Nora's the department helps you with. You may need something in the future. And if you obligate yourself to a very large debt repayment plan or something, you may not have the money to use for emergencies that you need that come up. And then also make sure that you are being current with any accounts that you're having trouble paying now. So you want to call the creditor, perhaps again, it's the electric company that maybe you've gotten behind on. So you want to contact that creditor to say, I want to still maintain a business relationship with you. I've had some trouble paying it. What can we do to get back on track? So that's step 1 and step 2. Now, step 3 is figuring out what debt that you owe. Sometimes I've been working with people who just aren't quite clear on what's happened in the past in their life, and they don't really are sure who it is that they owe money to. So some places to find any debt that might be alleged out there about you is your credit report. You can just take a look at your financial records, perhaps a credit card, debit cards, and you can also take a look at the Maryland Judiciary case search. In case you don't know what that is, that's a website that lists all of the public records in Maryland. Each state has their own variation of this, but it's all public records. So if you put your name in there, I've been working with many people who like, oh, look, I now have a judgment against me because I wasn't available or around. I didn't get the papers about it to go to court, and now there's a judgment. And so now I have a debt out here that I didn't know about. So these are some places to think about how to make that list of debts that you owe. Now, we're going to go back to the chat box here, and I'm wondering if you can take a look at these different types of debt, and let's figure out or talk about which ones are more important than others to address first. So there's a pending lawsuit, utility, landlord, taxes, student loans, a secured loan, if the person wants to keep that collateral, say a car and has a car loan on it, an unsecured loan. Maybe there's just a bank or a credit union that has a loan, personal loan that they gave the person, but it's not secured by anything that can be gone and taken. Credit cards, a car loan, car insurance, I'm trying to think about if the car is needed or not needed. A doctor, perhaps maybe they're not seeing this doctor anymore, they've gone to a different doctor. And then friends or families. So if you can drop in the chat box, which one do you think is one of the most important debts to start working on first? So give me a minute just to type those in. This is one of the steps that you need to take if you're trying to address debt and trying to pay it down. You need to figure out which one you're going to start with. So which one is pretty important? All right, landlord, thank you. Landlord utilities. Thank you for dropping these in. And one of the points that this is an important step to take is sometimes it could be overwhelming if there's several different debts that we're looking at and trying to figure out what do we do. Maybe we try to do them all at the same time by paying little bits of amount. And it's important to step back for a minute before ever getting into any kind of payment arrangement whatsoever and think about what is most important. How is this going to impact me? So thank you for putting some of those comments in here, but let's just talk about some of these. So a pending lawsuit has a high priority in at least addressing or talking about, maybe not jumping to paying it, but thinking about how do I look at any legal resource that I can access. Maybe it's legal aid or Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service or any other kind of pro bono lawyer service, because it hasn't actually been concluded yet. It's still out there, it's pending. And it might mean there's an opportunity to address this before it actually goes to court and a judgment is rendered perhaps against you, and therefore enabling that company to perhaps garnish your wages, which we don't want happening, because we need all the wages or any kind of benefits that you have available to you or assets that you have, you need to keep all of those. So a pending lawsuit needs to take a high priority in getting some legal assistance to see, is this something that you should address before it gets to court? Is there a way to resolve this? I know I actually had one lady in Frederick who had gotten divorced and was living in a housing program with her 3 children. She wasn't working and she had no income. She had very little assistance coming in at this point, and she was a victim of some domestic violence and some issues with her partner that he'd gotten into a lot of debt using her information. So she was able, with this pending lawsuit, to actually go to court, talk to that credit card company's lawyer and say, hey, here I am right now. I don't have anything. There's absolutely nothing you can get. Here's how this debt came about. It's not really even mine. And believe it or not, that company actually dismissed the lawsuit. So it's important to take time to address those. Utilities and landlord, as you noted in the chat box, are high priorities if you need to stay in that particular rental and if you need those utilities. If it's at a point where some people find themselves that perhaps there is no income to sustain staying in that rental, then maybe they're going to move in with friends or family. Then the landlord and utilities may take a little lower priority. But if you need to stay there in that place, that makes a high priority. Taxes are a fairly high priority, and there are resources here to help you negotiate with either the IRS or the Comptroller of Maryland in back taxes if they are owed. It's important to address them, and again, access those resources to help address that. Student loans can be a high priority depending on the person's situation. If they have the availability to pay something and get into the multiple different federal student loan repayment programs, whether it's income-based or income contingent, there's a lot of options to keep what's current with the student loan versus going into delinquency. So it is something to, again, look at resources to help figure out what are the options with those student loans. Now, sometimes some of these might be considered lower priority debts. So an unsecured loan, which is, again, a personal loan that isn't tied to something that the lender can come get, like a car or a house, those can sometimes take a lower priority and be addressed when the person has the availability to do so. Same thing with credit cards. Credit cards, again, it's important. We need to get to them at some point. But if we're in a situation that we have to pick and choose, taking the landlord utility, if we need to stay in that rental, is a higher priority than a credit card. And then the last one I want to talk about is friends and family. That's a very individual, personalized choice to everyone. Sometimes paying friends and family, if we owe them, is a higher priority because we may need to continue to use them in the future, or we may want to continue that relationship. Sometimes, on the other hand, though, they might be a little more flexible in holding off while we pay our landlord or pay utilities and then get to paying them. So that one's sort of a very individualized and personal decision to make. So our next step is to create a list of the debts that we now know we have, the resources, the money to be able to pay it back, and putting down the creditor's name, the amount of the debt, what is the interest rate that they're charging on their loan so we can make some decisions, what's the payment that I feel I can make, and what day have I paid this. So making sure that you're keeping track of your spending plan and your budget along with this debt list every single month so you can see it going down because you're making the payments. And then be sure to build in some rewards for when you're successful on paying off debt, just to kind of give ourselves that motivation and that psychological boost of like, yes, we got this, we're doing it. So that's step 5. Now let's talk about debt payments. When you're, again, in a place to be able to handle the debt and start paying it down, here are some tips. One of them is a critical step to take is to verify the debt first in writing. We already know that we're not reaffirming the debt. So we're not saying, yes, I owe this, I'll get to you. Now what we need to do is saying, so you allege I owe this debt. I need to see all the copies of the contract, all of the receipts. If it's medical bills, I need to see proof of all the services that I received down to every single aspirin that you gave me. Medical mistakes in billing are huge. It is really important with any debt that we think we're ready to address and pay that we get the documentation to verify this debt, and then we're asking them how much of this debt is fees and interest. So no payment plan gets into place at all until the debt has been verified. Now, if you're in the place to save up some money, creditors will generally be a little more favorable if they get a lump sum, meaning I can pay X dollars on this debt. That's it. That's all that I can pay, versus getting into a payment plan of X dollars per month. The debt collection companies, all creditors prefer to get, because that means they're going to actually get the money, versus perhaps you get into a payment plan arrangement, 6 months into it, maybe something happens and it stops. So of course, creditors are really interested in that lump sum. So call the creditor when you have that money that's available to pay. And then the terminology to use is, what will you take to settle this or to resolve this? Either one of those. What will you take to settle this? What will you take to resolve it? And then once you've negotiated that, hopefully maybe it's a little bit lower because they've taken off some fees and interest. We're going to follow up in writing. So we're going to go through these sample agreements here, because if you pay the money, maybe it's over the phone by a credit card, or maybe you're going to send a money order or a check. Once you have sent the money, we've lost pretty much any negotiating powers with that debt collection company because they've got the money. So let me show you some of these settlement agreement letters that we really had to get in place and be able to get everything signed before money goes to this company. So these debt settlement agreements are coming from NOLO, which is a nonprofit legal organization, as well as the National Consumer Law Center. And if anybody needs copies of these, I am happy to send these out to people or send you the link to get them yourself. So this one is the preferred, and the hopefully it's the most favorable to you as a consumer, but it's also really helpful in terms of documentation. So this is the preferred way to handle a debt settlement or a debt, repayment kind of agreement that you're going to get into with a collection agency. So you can see here that you're going to list the company's name and your name. You agree to resolve the matter of this alleged debt, put in the account number, and that you're alleging this debt claimed by the company, and you're settling it on these following terms and conditions. You put out the exact amount of the alleged debt. Note that it keeps saying alleged debt versus confirmed debt. That's very kind of different legalese, and that's why these are coming from law centers, because this is just a little more favorable again for the consumers. So it's going to be very detailed in terms of if this is a one-time lump sum, or it's going to be monthly payments, or that the acceptance of the payment will serve as a complete discharge of all monies due, and that the company agrees to consider this debt paid in full and agrees not to take further action to collect on this alleged debt. Again, you can see there's a lot of legal words in here, but it's meant to protect consumers. Then there's going to be details of how the payment's going to be made. And one of the most important parts in here is that upon payment of the whatever amount of money it is, the company agrees to remove any listing or information that may have been placed on the consumer's credit report, and they agree to never at any time in the future place any information regarding this transaction on the credit report. So this document serves for two purposes, very important purposes. One of them is to have the details of the settlement put into writing and very crystal clear, so there's no question whatsoever. So for example, say the amount of money is agreed upon, this is signed, the amount of money goes to the debt collection agency. 6 months later, the debt collection agency says, you know what, I want the rest of the money. They then try to contact the consumer to collect it. The consumer's like, hey, I've got it in writing what you agreed to. Done, you're out, stop. So that's one of the very big purposes of this letter. The other really big purpose is to try and help the credit report, because it's probably gone down, the score has been affected by the negative entries by the collection company on the consumer's credit report. This is really what's put in place to help the credit report and the credit score be in a better place. So if the company signs this, and if they then put something else negative on the consumer's credit report, the consumer sends this to the credit reporting agency. It's like, take that off. They agreed not to put anything else on here. So this is the preferred, the gold standard, if you will, of settlement agreements if you're going to be addressing debt. Now, unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't work and the company will not sign it. So Plan B is another agreement that's been drafted again by these legal organizations. And this one is saying that in response to the verbal debt settlement agreement made between your customer service person and myself. So this is transacted over the phone or perhaps even in emails if they do that. But what you're saying in this one is the letters to confirm my acceptance of this verbal offer. We've negotiated an amount of money to resolve this debt, and it's put here in the letter. I'm sending this amount of money. It is enclosed. But the language here that we're getting at is by accepting this payment, you, the company, agree that this is full and final settlement of this matter, and you agree not to place any negative information regarding this matter in the future on my credit report. So again, this is just documentation that if months later the company comes back and tries to collect more money or put something on someone's credit report after this has been settled, that this letter can be used as documentation to say, nope, we already agreed what we were going to do to settle this debt. I'm not paying anything else. And you need to take this off my credit report because of this letter. So this is Plan B. Now let's talk a little bit about which debts to kind of tackle first and how to do so. So perhaps a person has a credit card with $3,000 on it and it's got 12% interest rate. There's another credit card they owe too with $8,000, so more of a debt, and it has 14% interest. So let's talk about two different ways to pay down debt once you've gotten to a place where you can address them. So this one is called the Avalanche Method. This is taking the debt that has the highest interest rate, and that's going to be the one that gets tackled first. Sometimes people choose this method because eventually it will save them money because they're paying off the highest interest rate first. So they're saving on the amount of interest they're paying on debts. So you can see this has all these different types of debts: credit cards, auto loan, home equity, mortgage, student loan. And they're making a plan and prioritizing what to pay first based on interest rate. So the method, though, that being used by addressing the highest interest rate first, the monthly minimum is $50 on that first credit card. But the person has an extra $400 a month that they want to put towards paying down debt. So they're going to pay $450 a month on that credit card until it's done. It's $5,000. They're going to knock that out because they're going to save on interest. But the other one I want to share with you too is taking the smallest amount of debt owed and going with that one first. So with this one, the auto loan is the smallest amount of money that is owed. It's not the highest interest rate. It's 8% versus 14%. But they still have the extra $400 a month they're going to pay. Instead of paying that monthly payment of $100, they're going to start paying $500 and knock out this $4,000 worth of debt fairly quickly, right? About 8 months. And sometimes people choose this type of strategy versus the other one that might save more money because they're paying off the highest interest rate first. They pay this way first to kind of get debt done. It basically gives that psychological mental boost of like, yay, I've got one out of the way. Knock it off. I'll put that now, $500 a month, onto the next debt I'm going to address, which is that credit card with the 14% interest. So again, sort of a personal decision on which way to go, but there's two different, thoughts and processes with that. So I want to talk a little bit about debt management plan and debt settlement plans. You may see a lot of advertisements, particularly on late night TV, and from my consumer protection hat that I want to put on, late night TV ads, you need to be really careful with those. For some reason, they just kind of seem to be a little sketchy and are often separating people from their dollars that they didn't need to. So sometimes you'll see on these ads that you've got debt, no problem. We can settle it for you on pennies on the dollar. We'll take care of it. We'll fix your credit report and everything. So let's talk about debt management plans first. Debt management plans are generally administered by nonprofit credit counseling agencies. And again, note the words nonprofit because we're trying to spend the least amount of money in order to pay down our debt because we want the money going towards paying down our debt. So you need to take a look at these different agencies and sort of choose them carefully based on online reviews and recommendations. So this nonprofit credit counseling agency will contact the person's creditors. They will create a plan for the consumer to pay off all the different creditors that they have. And what they'll work on is getting interest and fees reduced. So these creditors have already agreed with most of the nonprofit credit counseling agencies to say, all right, when you come to me with a consumer, because I know you as a nonprofit agency are going to work with this consumer and they're going to actually be able to pay this debt back, I will knock off interest and fees for this person. So then what happens is the consumer pays this nonprofit credit counseling agency, and they generally do about a 4-year plan. They break it up into the same amount of payments, like an installment loan, for 4 years. At the end of those 4 years, all those different debts are done. And it will actually be reported to the person's credit report that they are making these payments. And it's reported favorably on the consumer's credit report because the original amount of debt is being repaid. Just fees and interest have been reduced. So these payment plans can be very helpful in terms of combining all the debt that someone owes. And maybe they could do it themselves in terms of negotiating with each one of the companies that they owe. But sometimes it can be overwhelming, and getting a third-party nonprofit credit counseling agency in there to help can really sort of take away some of the stress of doing it on your own. So again, they will combine all of the debt. They will negotiate fees and interest to come down. They will come up with a monthly amount that you pay per month for about 48 months, 4 years. When it's done, it's done. But the other thing that these agencies offer is they will support you in terms of looking holistically at your financial picture. They'll ask about your spending plan. They will get documentation in terms of your income, all the different debts, because if there actually isn't the income there to repay the debts, they will let you know that, and they will help you identify a plan from there on what to do. Now, these debt settlement companies, the ones I was talking about, late night TV, or I see roadside signs for them, because they had had such difficulties in the way that they were dealing with consumers, the Federal Trade Commission actually took action on debt settlement companies and have put some laws into place on what they can and cannot do. So I really need you to be very careful if you're looking at any type of these companies, because they have a unfavorable reputation in dealing with consumers. I know when I was working in consumer protection for many years, I was investigating a company, and their technique was to say to the consumer, stop paying off your creditors right here, right now. From this moment on, don't pay anybody, which of course tanks the person's credit score right there. Then they tell them, save up X number of dollars. It would be thousands of dollars. Once you've gotten that, give it to us, which consumers did. And then supposedly the company was going to contact the consumer's creditors, negotiate pennies on the dollar, and actually try to make those payment plans from the money that they had of the consumers. What was happening though is they were never paying creditors. They were never negotiating on the consumer's behalf. They were literally taking their money. That was one of the worst ones. Some of the other ones that Federal Trade Commission investigated as well, they were charging incredibly high fees to the consumer for the action of going to the consumer's creditors and trying to negotiate on their behalf. And they would take their money up front, sometimes $1,500, $2,000 up front before they ever did anything. So then what happened is the Federal Trade Commission said, you can no longer actually charge a consumer a fee before services are actually rendered. You actually have to do something before you can charge them. But what they also may not know or tell you is that when they negotiate, if they do, with the creditors for pennies on the dollar of the debt that's owed, that is reported negatively on a consumer's credit report because the original amount of debt is not being repaid. And then there's more. The amount of money of the original debt that has not been repaid may actually frequently results in that company filing a tax form. Then the consumer gets the tax form on their end that this money that has been basically dismissed or not repaid is considered taxable income in their tax return. People don't understand that when they come to our tax sites. They're like, what is this document? And then they actually have to pay taxes versus getting a refund because the amount of debt that was not repaid is considered income. All right, so we have a question here or a comment. I wish I had known to use a nonprofit agency. Absolutely. I did not have a good experience with a debt agency I used in the past. I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm glad you're really sharing that, because you're right. That is such an important information to get out to people, because these debt agencies are very effective in their advertisements. They look good, right? It looks very like, oh, I definitely need their help. This would be great for me. They're very good at separating consumers from dollars. They're not particularly good at helping consumers in resolving debt. Thank you for that comment. So the last couple of things to think about is sometimes bankruptcy is appropriate. Absolutely. And these are two agencies in Maryland that can help consumers assess whether or not bankruptcy is the best option: Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Maryland and Legal Aid. So just to summarize, paying off debt, some of the steps to success are: create the action plan, put it in writing, make sure you have your steps down, because that puts you in control. You feel like you're making progress when you can see that you are taking the steps that you've outlined to do this. So is there anything that needs to be disputed? Maybe you don't owe the debt, or maybe the amount is incorrect. It is incredibly common that, again, hospital bills or debt collection companies have inaccurate records, and what they're saying the consumer owes, they actually do not. If we need to talk to a credit counselor, that is completely appropriate and can be very helpful. Maybe legal advice is needed, taking a look at which debt has a higher priority, and then decide which strategy that you want to use. Is it the smallest account that you want to pay off and knock out? Or is it the most recent one, maybe to help the credit report? Or is it the one with highest interest? Which one do you want to address first? So when I said in the beginning that there's actually some very great legal assistance to you in Maryland, this has been a recent development that is huge. The Maryland Attorney General's office led a task force. It's called the Access to Justice Task Force. And what they have created is an incredible website that literally has some legal information to help you that before this had been very difficult for consumers to get to. So it's called the debtcollectionmaryland.org. They have all kinds of great forms and guidance and everything that if you're being sued, particularly for a debt of less than $5,000, this is an amazing website to you. All right, so I see a comment. We need to see the, okay, I will go back to this slide for the CCCS Maryland or Legal Aid. They both have great websites too. So if you just Google Maryland Legal Aid, it comes right up, as does CCCS Maryland. And you can either make appointments or call or be able to talk to someone now, of course, virtually, and be able to get to the resources that you need. And this website is really kind of a first place to go to get some information. So it's great to have very consumer-friendly legal advice on here. And with that, I will turn to any questions. Here is my contact information. Again, this is being recorded and we put on Cash Academy, and certainly Nora through the Department of Disabilities will have access to this webinar as well. So if there's any questions that anyone has, please put them in the chat box. I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Sue, and thanks again for joining us, everyone. I just want to let you know I'm going to put my email address in the chat as well. Just in case, you're welcome to contact me with any questions or concerns, or if you want access to any of the slide decks of any of the presentations from this month, just let me know. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, wait a minute to see if there's any questions. All right, well, without seeing any questions, again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today and taking time out to attend this webinar. And I'm going to stop the recording and sharing and end the webinar. And I really hope that everyone has a great rest of their day.